You're listening to The Disconnect, a podcast about anxiety and how it disconnects you from your normal self. We're here to share our journey and help you through yours to show you you're not alone. And now, your hosts, Austin Grant and Lindsay Jones. Welcome to episode 0 of The Disconnect. My name's Austin.
And I'm Lindsay.
And this episode is going to be an introduction to our Disconnect podcast, a show for people with anxiety, created by people with anxiety.
First and foremost, we are not medical professionals. As a disclaimer, nothing we say on the podcast is medical advice. We always recommend seeking out professional and medical help for any diagnosis or treatment. We are just humans who have experienced anxiety and continue to experience anxiety, and we want to share our journey with you. Austin and I have spent hours talking through our anxiety and our mental health, and through these conversations, we have found that being able to relate with someone who is going through a similar experience has allowed us to destigmatize our anxiety and understand that it's okay to not be okay.
We decided that we wanted to start a podcast that mimics these conversations with the hope that we can help others feel less alone when dealing with their anxiety or mental health. This then allowed us to come up with our name, The Disconnect, because anxiety disconnects you from your normal self, and it can really affect how you act on a daily basis. We hope through this podcast that we can bring some sense of normalcy to your life if you're feeling like this, and offer some perspective on how we've both handled this, in the hope that anyone listening can hear our experience and understand that they're not alone.
Next, we would like to discuss what you can expect from the podcast. Anxiety is something that doesn't go away. Rather, it is something that you get better at dealing with as time goes on. That being said, we want to post at least one episode a month in the beginning to give perspective and backstory on our individual journeys with anxiety and how it has manifested in different ways for each of us.
So if there's something you guys would like us to talk about or provide perspective on, please go ahead and email us at frankdisconnect@gmail.com or DM us on Instagram and Twitter at frankdisconnect. I know some of you are probably wondering why we chose the name Frank and how it correlates to this podcast, but don't worry, we'll go ahead and discuss that in a future episode, so stay tuned.
So to finish up, we wanted to introduce a section that we'll probably have at the end of every podcast. It's going to be a section where we share a quote that has particularly resonated with us in the past, or is something that we have connected to that has maybe provided insight for the experience that we're going through. Today's quote was posted by XO Enneagram on Instagram and goes like this: "Sometimes self-care is doing the hard thing that you know you will feel better after doing. Sometimes self-care is holding tightly to your values even when it's difficult. Sometimes self-care is getting outside of yourself even when you don't feel like it." This quote resonates with us because we have both experienced particular difficulty in all three of these areas, and it is just a daily reminder for us to keep ourselves on track with self-care.
Yeah, and I think for me, the hardest thing during this time was actually admitting to myself that I wasn't okay and that I should probably get some help. And so through that, I sought out some professional help and can't even tell you guys how much that has helped. It's been one of the best decisions I've ever made, and how much I've learned recently about myself is something that I never thought was possible. The second bullet point really stood out to me as well, because values are something that I've always kept close, throughout all my life. And when I started falling into this pit of anxiety, I really started questioning myself and my values, like I'd done something wrong to deserve this. I've been a Christian all my life, and this was actually really hard for me to work through and understand why it was happening, because that was the biggest thing. I couldn't understand why at this point in my life was I going through this, and it was so difficult for me. But through this all, I've found a way out, and I'm excited to share this journey with you all and help you find a way out too.
The last section of the quote is talking about getting outside of your comfort zone. And for me, this is incredibly important because it always reminds me of what I'm capable of. And in the past, I've put myself into situations that are out of my comfort zone. And I've found that I have experienced a lot of positive growth by proving to myself that I could do whatever this difficult task was that I'd set for myself. And so after spending so much time talking to Austin and talking him through his anxiety, I thought that it might be a good idea for him to get out of his comfort zone and to do something that he wouldn't normally do. And so at the time, I had an extra ticket to a concert in Vegas and decided this would be a perfect opportunity for him to come with me to the concert because he'd never been to a concert before.
Define perfect opportunity. In my brain, this was the absolute worst time because I was in the midst of overcoming this anxiety I've been dealing with one step at a time, baby step in it, and here's Lindsay throwing me into the ocean, no life vest, and I haven't even had the chance to get my feet wet. And honestly, if she would have asked me a couple weeks earlier, I would have straight up shut her down in a heartbeat and ignored her until she came back, just because in the state of mind I was, or just living in that fear that anxiety creates and puts you in. But in that moment, I felt that this was something I needed to do, and so I did it. I went to the concert, and it was incredible. Not only was the music, really good and it sounded amazing, but the fact that I went out, did something spontaneous that I didn't think I could do, that made the entire trip for me.
And I'd like to add that if you have somebody in your life who you're comfortable with going to concerts or going to certain places to get out of your comfort zone,
throw them in the deep end.
It can really help to have somebody go with you to those things. So I was never gonna have Austin go by himself. I always intended on going with him, but I was that life vest for him. I was the person who's going to be there to say, hey, if this is too much, we can leave. But I felt that it was something that was good and positive for him in that moment. And
I was waiting the whole time. I was holding on to that lever just to get the heck out of there, finding any excuse I could. All right, Lindsay, let's go. Like, concert's done. We're like 6 songs in, and she pushed me through it for sure.
But you stayed, and it was a positive experience, and I'm very proud of you for going through that.
So to close out, we all want you to share with us how this quote resonates with you. And so let us know by DMing us on Instagram or Twitter at FrankDisconnect or emailing frankdisconnect@gmail.com. Thanks again for tuning into our first episode. Tune in next month for another episode of The Disconnect.